They say respect is earned, not demanded. But when three bikers decided to humiliate a quiet, 68-year-old black woman at a small-town diner, they had no idea her son, a decorated Navy SEAL with 15 years of combat experience, was sitting just 2 booths away. What happened next would teach them the hardest lesson of their lives, some battles you can't win, and some people you should never underestimate. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss. This is Rosie's Diner in rural Georgia, a place where everybody knows everybody, where coffee is always hot, and respect has always been the foundation of community. For 30 years, Martha Williams has been a fixture here. A retired school teacher, a church volunteer, a woman who raised her son alone after her husband died in service. But today, 3 out-of-town bikers would mistake her quiet dignity for weakness. They would mock her, humiliate her, and escalate their cruelty, unaware that her son, Lieutenant Commander James Williams, trained in close-quarters combat and tactical restraint, was watching every move. Today, they would learn that true power doesn't announce itself. It waits. It calculates. And when it acts, it does so with precision, discipline, and devastating control. The morning sun filtered through the Venetian blinds of Rosie's Diner, casting amber stripes across the worn linoleum floor. Outside, the Georgia heat was already building, but inside, the air conditioning hummed a steady rhythm alongside the clink of coffee cups and the sizzle of bacon on the griddle. This was the heart of Meadowbrook, population 3,200, where the sweet tea was always cold, the gossip was always warm, and everybody knew your name before you'd finish parking your truck. Martha Williams sat in her usual booth by the window, third one from the entrance, where she'd sat every Tuesday and Thursday morning for the past 12 years. At 68, she carried herself with the kind of quiet elegance that couldn't be taught. Spine straight, hands folded neatly on the table, her silver-streaked hair pulled back into a soft bun that framed her face like a crown. She wore a simple lavender blouse, pressed slacks, and small pearl earrings that had belonged to her mother. Everything about Martha spoke of intention, of a life lived with purpose and care. "More coffee, Miss Martha." Sally, the waitress, appeared with the pot. Her smile genuine and familiar. "Just half a cup, dear. Thank you." Martha's voice was soft but clear, each word enunciated with the precision of someone who'd spent 35 years teaching 5th grade grammar. "And, Sally, how did your daughter's recital go?" Sally's face lit up. "Oh, she was wonderful, nervous as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs, but she got through her piece without a single mistake. I wish you could have been there. Miss Martha, you always believed in her, even when she struggled with reading." "She found her voice," Martha said, her eyes crinkling with warmth. "Some children sing with words, others with music. Both are equally beautiful." Sally squeezed Martha's shoulder affectionately before moving to refill the farmer's cup 2 booths down. This was the rhythm of Rosie's Diner. These small connections, these gentle acknowledgments of shared humanity. Martha had been part of this fabric for decades, first as a young wife accompanying her husband Thomas for Sunday breakfasts, then as a widowed mother bringing her boy in for pancakes after church, and finally as a woman alone, marking time with coffee and pie and the kindness of neighbors who'd become family. Her slice of pecan pie sat before her, barely touched. Martha never rushed. She believed that hurrying through life meant missing it entirely, a philosophy she'd carried from her classroom into every corner of her existence. Between sips of coffee, she gazed out the window at the town square, where the bronze statue of a Confederate soldier stood beside the newer memorial honoring all veterans. Thomas's name was there, etched into black granite. Captain Thomas Williams, U.S. Army, 1948-2003, faithful unto death. 55 years old when a heart attack took him, too young, too sudden, but he'd lived with honor, served 2 tours in Vietnam, and come home to build a life of service in different ways. Coaching Little League, mentoring troubled youth, showing their son James what it meant to be a man of principle rather than pretense. Martha touched the simple gold band she still wore on her left hand, a habit 22 years in the making. Thomas used to tell her, "Dignity isn't about never being knocked down, Martha. It's about how you stand back up and what you do with your hands when you rise." She'd watched him live that truth through racism, through the whispers when they'd moved to this predominantly white town in 1978, through the challenges of being a black military officer in an era that didn't always welcome such things. And she'd taught James the same lesson, raising him alone after Thomas's death. Her son was 40 now, though in her mind, he was still the serious little boy who'd cried at his father's funeral and then spent the next decade trying to make him proud. She didn't know where James was these days. His work with the Navy kept him away for months at a time, and their phone calls were brief, carefully worded around what he couldn't say. But she knew her son carried his father's legacy in his bones, that same commitment to service, that same quiet strength that didn't need to announce itself. Martha took a small bite of pie, savoring the sweetness, the way the pecans crunched between her teeth. Around her, the diner hummed with life. Old Earl Tucker sat at the counter, complaining good-naturedly about the price of fertilizer. A young couple in the corner booth held hands across the table, planning their wedding. The cook, Big Mike, sang along tunelessly to the radio playing Willie Nelson. This was her world, small, predictable, safe. A world where respect was currency and kindness was expected. Martha had spent her life in rooms like this, teaching children that how you treated people mattered more than what you owned or how loud you could shout. Dignity cannot be taken, only given away, she'd written on her blackboard every year. You control nothing in this world except your own character. She believed that still, even after seeing Thomas buried, even after raising a son in a world that sometimes seemed determined to break people like them. Martha Williams had learned long ago that the measure of a soul wasn't in its dominance, but in its grace under pressure. She had no idea that philosophy was about to be tested in ways she'd never imagined. The bell above the diner door chimed. Martha glanced up reflexively, then returned to her coffee. 3 motorcycles roared into the parking lot outside. The roar of the motorcycles shattered the morning's peace like a brick through stained glass. 3 Harleys pulled into the diner's parking lot with deliberate aggression, their engines revving unnecessarily loud, announcing dominance before their riders had even dismounted. The chrome gleamed predatory in the sunlight. Exhaust fumes drifted through the open door as the bell chimed their entrance. They came in like a storm front, all leather and denim, tattoos snaking up forearms, boots heavy enough to crack tile. The leader entered first, and everything about him screamed entitlement. Colt, though no one here knew his name yet, stood roughly 6'2", broad-shouldered, with a wild tangle of dark hair pulled into a ponytail. His arms were a canvas of ink, skulls, snakes, a Confederate flag, words in Gothic script that promised violence. A thick beard couldn't hide the sneer that seemed permanently carved into his face. "Well, well," Colt announced, to no one in particular, his voice deliberately loud, demanding attention. "Look at this place, like stepping into a fucking time machine." Behind him, Rex followed. Shorter but wider, built like a concrete block with a shaved head that bore scars from old fights. His eyes swept the room with predatory assessment, sizing up every person like a bouncer, deciding who deserved to stay and who needed removing. He cracked his knuckles, a sound like kindling snapping. The third man, Bones, earned his nickname from his gaunt frame and angular face. At 32, he looked older, weathered by meth or hard living or both. His nervous energy filled the space, bouncing on his heels, grinning too wide, looking for approval from Colt like a dog waiting for scraps. The temperature in Rosie's diner dropped 10 degrees. Earl Tucker's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. The young couple in the corner booth went silent, the woman's hand tightening around her fiancé's. Big Mike's singing cut off mid-verse. Even the radio seemed quiet, as if Willie Nelson himself sensed the shift. Sally approached with the coffee pot, her smile professional but strained. "Morning. Gentlemen, sit anywhere you'd like and I'll—" "Gentlemen," Colt laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. "You hear that, boys? She thinks we're gentlemen." He dropped into a booth with exaggerated casualness, boots up on the vinyl seat, tracking mud across the cushion Sally had probably cleaned an hour ago. "We're a lot of things, sweetheart, but gentle ain't one of them." Rex and Bones laughed on cue, sliding into the booth across from him. Rex's bulk made the seat groan in protest. Sally's smile tightened. "Can I get you some coffee while you look at the menu?" "Coffee in this shithole?" Bones snorted. "Probably tastes like dishwater." "Then maybe you should go somewhere else," Sally said quietly, her southern politeness barely masking the edge underneath. The diner went utterly still. Colt's eyes narrowed. Focusing on Sally with sudden intensity, he leaned forward slowly, deliberately invading her space. "What was that, honey? You trying to tell us we're not welcome?" His voice dropped to something soft and dangerous. "See, where we come from, waitresses know their place. They smile, pour coffee, and keep their opinions to themselves." Sally's face flushed, but she held her ground. "I just meant—" "She meant," Rex interrupted, his voice like gravel in a cement mixer, "that she's going to get us 3 coffees, 3 breakfast specials, and she's going to be real nice about it. Aren't you, sweetheart?" The threat hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Sally's hand trembled slightly on the coffee pot. She nodded once, poured their coffee in silence, and retreated to the kitchen. Through the order window, Big Mike watched with clenched jaw, his massive hands gripping the counter edge. "Christ, these small towns," Colt said loudly, performing for the room now. "Everybody acting like they're in some Norman Rockwell painting. Newsflash, people. The world moved on. This whole wholesome America bullshit." He gestured around the diner with contempt. "Dead and buried." Earl Tucker carefully set down his fork, eyes on his plate. The young couple gathered their things, leaving money on the table and heading for the door without finishing their breakfast. As they passed, Bones stuck out his boot, nearly tripping the young man. "Oops," Bones said, grinning. "Clumsy me." The young man paused, his fiancée pulling at his arm. For a moment, he seemed to consider saying something. Rex shifted in his seat, cracking his neck, and the moment passed. They left quickly, the bell chiming their retreat. "That's right," Colt called after them. "Run along, kids. Grown folks are talking." Martha Williams sat perfectly still in her booth, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. She'd seen men like this before, in her classroom as troubled boys, in the news as grown men who'd never learned that power and strength were different things. She recognized the performance, the desperate need to dominate because somewhere deep inside, they felt small. She set down her cup with quiet precision, her hands steady, and returned her attention to her pie. Whatever storm these men brought with them, it would pass. Storms always did. But in her peripheral vision, she saw Colt's eyes sweep the room and land on her, saw the way his expression shifted, calculating. Saw Bones lean in and whisper something that made all three of them laugh. Martha took another bite of pie, her face serene, giving away nothing. In the corner booth she hadn't yet noticed, a newspaper lowered an inch. Dark eyes watched from beneath a baseball cap, assessing, cataloging, not yet moving. The storm was just beginning. In the corner booth, farthest from the entrance, James Williams had already mapped every exit before the bikers' motorcycles cut their engines. It was instinct now after 15 years, the automatic threat assessment that happened faster than conscious thought. 2 windows, west-facing, standard residential glass, breakable. Kitchen door, swinging, no lock, clear egress to rear exit. Front entrance, single door, opens inward, potential bottleneck. 3 incoming hostiles, armed unknown, aggressive posture confirmed, intoxication level undetermined. All of this processed in the 2 seconds it took James to turn a page of his newspaper. He didn't look like a weapon. That was intentional. At 40, James Williams had learned that the most dangerous men rarely advertised it. He wore faded Levi's, a plain gray t-shirt that fit loose enough to conceal his frame, and a Braves baseball cap pulled low. No military bearing, no tactical watch, nothing that screamed operator. Just another black man having breakfast, anonymous and unremarkable. Exactly how he preferred it. His eggs were getting cold, but James didn't mind. He'd eaten cold MREs in Kandahar, cold rice in the Philippines, nothing at all for 3 days during a reconnaissance mission in Yemen that officially never happened. Cold eggs at his hometown diner barely registered. He took a measured bite, chewed slowly, and watched the biker's reflection in the window glass. 3 against, room of 12. Leader. Establishes dominance through volume and spatial invasion. Enforcer provides physical backup. Third man seeks approval. Follower, insecure, potentially most unpredictable. The analysis happened automatically, a burden of his training. James couldn't turn it off any more than he could stop breathing. Everywhere he went, he saw vectors of attack, calculated response times, identified improvised weapons. The salt shaker on his table, grip at base, strike to temple or throat. The coffee pot in Sally's hand, scalding liquid, 7-foot range, temporary blindness. The booth bench he sat on, solid oak under the vinyl, removable, could be used as shield or battering ram. This was what they didn't show in the recruitment videos, how the training rewired your brain until you couldn't sit in a diner without planning how to kill everyone in it. James took a sip of coffee, forced his shoulders to relax. He was on leave. 21 days of blessed nothing between deployments. Time to remember what it felt like to be James Williams, the son instead of Lieutenant Commander Williams the SEAL. He'd flown into Atlanta 2 days ago, rented a car, and driven to Meadowbrook with no agenda, except seeing his mother and sleeping in a bed that didn't require a security perimeter. Jimmy Williams, as I live and breathe. Sally appeared at his booth, coffee pot in hand, her earlier tension melting into genuine warmth. She'd known him since he was 10 years old. Used to sneak him extra pancakes when his mother brought him in for breakfast. Miss Sally. James smiled, the expression transforming his face from watchful to open. How have you been? Better now that you're home safe. She refilled his cup without asking, her eyes scanning him the way mothers do, checking for injuries or weight loss or signs of trauma. Your mama know you're in town? Not yet. Wanted to surprise her. Figure I'll head over to her place after breakfast. He gestured to the seat across from him. You got a minute? Sally glanced toward the bikers, her jaw tightening. Not really, baby. Got some difficult customers this morning. James had already noticed, had watched Rex invade Sally's space, heard Colt's degrading tone, seen the young couple flee, every detail cataloged and filed. But he also knew that inserting himself unnecessarily often escalated situations rather than diffused them. 15 years had taught him that violence was a tool of last resort, not first response. They giving you real trouble? He asked quietly. Nothing I can't handle. Sally's pride was evident, but so was the tremor in her hand. Just big talkers, probably. You know the type. James knew the type intimately. Had served alongside some, fought against others. Learned that loud often masked empty. His instructors at Coronado had drilled it into every candidate. True operators don't need to prove anything. They're too busy controlling the environment to waste energy on theater. I'm right here if you need anything, James said simply. You know that, right? Sally squeezed his shoulder. The same affectionate gesture she'd given his mother earlier. I know, baby. You eat your breakfast. Everything's fine. She walked away, and James returned to his newspaper, though he wasn't reading anymore. His body language remained relaxed. The slouch studied and practiced, the casual way he lifted his coffee cup designed to project disinterest. But his peripheral vision tracked every movement in the diner. His hearing isolated individual conversations from the ambient noise, and his mind ran through scenarios with cold precision. Engage only if civilians are in immediate danger. Assess de-escalation options first. Use minimum necessary force. Document everything for after-action review. The rules of engagement played on loop in his head, the same rules that had kept him alive through 14 deployments across 7 countries. Violence was easy. Any fool could throw a punch. The hard part, the part that separated professionals from amateurs, was knowing when not to. James took another bite of cold eggs and waited. He was good at waiting. Colt's eyes had found their target. Jesus Christ, he announced loudly, his voice cutting through the diner's nervous quiet. Look at Grandma over there, hogging that whole booth by herself. He gestured toward Martha with his coffee cup, sloshing liquid onto the table. What is she, camping out? Writing her memoir? Rex snorted. Bones leaned out of their booth to get a better look, his grin spreading. Martha kept her eyes on her pie, her fork moving with deliberate precision. She cut a small piece, brought it to her mouth, chewed slowly. The tremor in her hand was barely visible. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Yo. Grandma, Colt called directly to her now. This ain't a library. You gonna order something else or just keep taking up space all morning? Some of us got places to be. The irony of three men who'd been sitting for 10 minutes complaining about someone who'd been there longer wasn't lost on Earl Tucker, but he kept his mouth shut, suddenly fascinated by his hash browns. Martha took a sip of her coffee. In her mind, she heard her own voice from 3 decades of teaching. When someone tries to make themselves bigger by making you smaller, you win by refusing to shrink. I swear, these old people, Colt continued, playing to his audience of 2, moving through life, like they got all the time in the world. Maybe that's the problem with this town. Everybody's half dead already and don't even know it. Bones howled with laughter. Rex smiled, cold and mean. Martha set down her cup with barely a sound. She folded her hands in her lap, closed her eyes for a 3-count breath, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way she'd taught anxious students before standardized tests. Dignity cannot be taken, only given away. She would not give these men the power to disturb her peace. From his corner booth, James's newspaper dipped half an inch. His jaw tightened imperceptibly. He watched his mother, recognized her even with his back partially turned, would know the set of her shoulders anywhere, and felt rage kindle in his chest like a match struck in darkness. But he didn't move. Not yet. Words were just words. Humiliation was temporary. He'd intervene when necessary, not before. Assess, calculate, control. 5 minutes passed. The bikers received their food, greasy plates of eggs, bacon, and toast that they ate with exaggerated disgust, loudly complaining about everything. Martha continued with her pie, though she'd lost all appetite. She was simply refusing to be driven from a place she'd occupied peacefully for 12 years. Then Rex stood. He stretched theatrically, his massive frame deliberately taking up space. "Gotta hit the head," he announced. The bathroom was to the left, a clear path that required walking nowhere near Martha's booth. Rex walked to the right. He moved with the false casualness of premeditated cruelty, his path taking him directly past Martha's table. As he passed, his hip accidentally struck the edge of her table with enough force to make everything jump. Martha's coffee cup overturned. The dark liquid spreading across the table in a steaming pool, soaking her napkin, dripping onto her lap. She gasped, pushing back reflexively as the hot coffee hit her slacks. "Oh shit," Rex said, his tone utterly devoid of sincerity. "My bad." He didn't stop walking, didn't offer to help, didn't even look back. Behind him, Colt and Bones erupted in laughter. Sally rushed over with a towel, her face flushed with anger and helplessness. "Miss Martha, I'm so sorry. It's fine, dear." Martha's voice was steady even as her hands shook while dabbing at the coffee on her clothes. "Accidents happen." "That wasn't an accident," Sally hissed, quiet enough that only Martha could hear. "Nevertheless." Martha's eyes met Sally's, and in them was a depth of experience that Sally couldn't fully comprehend. Decades of dignified survival in a world that had tested her in ways these bikers couldn't imagine. "I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. Her late husband's face flashed in her memory. Thomas, telling her about the indignities he'd faced in the army, the casual cruelties of men who believed power came from humiliation. "Martha," he'd said, "you can't control what they do. You can only control who you are in response." She blinked back tears, not from pain, but from the weight of maintaining grace under assault. In the corner, James's knuckles whitened around his coffee cup. The newspaper crumpled slightly in his grip. Every instinct screamed at him to act. Rex was now returning from the bathroom, smirking, making deliberate eye contact with Martha as if daring her to complain. Not yet, James told himself. Property damage, no physical contact, verbal humiliation. Technically not assault. Not yet. But his body was already preparing, muscles coiling, breathing shifting to the controlled rhythm of pre-combat focus. Sally brought Martha fresh coffee and a clean napkin. Martha thanked her with quiet dignity, reset her table, and returned to her pie. Though now it was purely symbolic, each bite an act of defiance. That's when Bones made his move. "Hey, Colt, check this out." Bones slid from their booth and walked directly to Martha's table. Before she could react, he reached down and plucked the remaining slice of pie right off her plate, his grimy fingers leaving prints in the pecan filling. "Thanks, Grandma," he said, taking an exaggerated bite. "You weren't going to finish this anyway, right? Old people don't need sugar." Martha's fork froze mid-air. Her mouth opened slightly, shock breaking through her carefully maintained composure. Colt had his phone out now, filming, laughing so hard he could barely hold it steady. "Dude, that's perfect. That's fucking perfect. Look at her face." "Post that shit," Rex encouraged, leaning over to see the screen. Hashtag respect your elders. They dissolved into cruel laughter. Martha's eyes filled with tears, not from the theft, but from the violation of it. The casual contempt, the reduction of her humanity to entertainment. For 68 years, she'd maintained her dignity through racism, through widowhood, through every trial life had offered. But something about this moment, being mocked, filmed, treated as less than human while people watched and did nothing, threatened to crack something deep inside her. Dignity cannot be taken, only given away. But what if you were tired? What if you'd been strong for so long that you had nothing left? Her hands trembled. She placed them flat on the table, trying to anchor herself. One tear escaped, tracking down her cheek. Earl Tucker stared at his plate. Big Mike gripped the kitchen counter so hard his hands ached, but he didn't intervene. The bikers were younger, stronger, violent. What could an old farmer or a cook do? In the corner booth, James's newspaper lowered completely. His eyes met his mother's across the diner. And in that moment, Martha's shock doubled. James. Her lips formed his name soundlessly. James stood slowly, his movement fluid and controlled. His face showed nothing, no anger, no rage, just absolute focus, the kind of calm that preceded lightning. Every predator in the animal kingdom would have recognized that stillness, but Colt, Rex, and Bones were too busy laughing at their video to notice the storm gathering in the corner. Not yet, but soon. The laughter died down, but the cruelty didn't. Colt pocketed his phone, glanced around the diner with the satisfied smirk of someone who'd successfully terrorized a room, and then his eyes landed back on Martha's booth. The sunlight streaming through the window, the comfortable corner position, the small table with its view of the town square. Suddenly, he wanted it. Not because he needed it, because he could take it. "You know what?" Colt stood, stretching with theatrical casualness. "I'm tired of sitting in this shitty booth. The sun's in my eyes." He walked toward Martha, his boots heavy on the linoleum. "Hey, Grandma, we're gonna need you to move." Martha looked up at him, her tear-stained face composed despite everything. When she spoke, her voice carried the same gentle firmness she'd used with difficult students for 3 decades. This booth is occupied. There are several others available. Nah. See, we want this one. Colt leaned against the table, looming over her. So, how about you take your coffee and your attitude and find somewhere else to park it? No. The word was quiet, but absolute. I was here first. I'm not finished with my breakfast. You're welcome to any other seat in the diner. The temperature in the room dropped to Arctic. Did she just? Bones started. Yeah, Rex said, standing. She did. Martha's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her hands folded on the table, kept her spine straight. In her mind, Thomas's voice. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply refuse to move. Last chance, old woman. Colt's voice turned to ice. Get up, or we'll move you ourselves. No. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then Rex moved. He crossed the distance in 2 strides, his massive hand clamping around Martha's upper arm like a vice. All right, that's it. Time to go, Grandma. Don't touch me! Martha's voice rose for the first time, sharp with alarm. She tried to pull away, but Rex's grip only tightened, his fingers digging into her flesh hard enough to bruise. Rex said move! He yanked her sideways with brutal force, trying to drag her from the booth. Martha grabbed the table edge with her free hand, resisting. Her body caught between the seat and Rex's pulling. Stop it! Let go of me! Help her! Sally screamed from behind the counter. But no one moved, paralyzed by fear or self-preservation or the terrible calculus of violence. Rex yanked harder. Martha's purse, which had been sitting on the seat beside her, tumbled to the floor. The contents exploded across the linoleum: wallet, tissues, reading glasses, lipstick, loose change, rolling under tables, keys skittering across tile, and a photograph in a small silver frame. It landed face up near Colt's boot. Bones picked it up, squinting at it. Well, what do we have here? The photograph was old, but carefully preserved. Thomas Williams, in his army dress uniform, young and proud, standing beside a teenage James in his navy dress blues at his graduation from basic training. Both men stood at attention, father and son, a legacy of service captured in a single moment. Your husband? Bones held the frame up, showing it to Colt and Rex. Rex still had Martha's arm, though she'd stopped struggling, her eyes fixed on the photograph with desperate longing. Please, Martha whispered. Please give that back. Oh, how sweet, Colt said, taking the frame from Bones. A military family. Let me guess. Your husband's dead. Martha's face crumpled. Please. And this? Colt tapped the glass over James's image. Is this supposed to be your son? The sailor boy? He laughed, sharp and cruel. Let me guess. He's off saving the world, right? Big tough military man? Give it back. Martha's voice broke. Your husband's dead, lady, Colt said, his voice deliberately vicious. And your son? He examined the photo with exaggerated scrutiny. Probably a fake soldier. Probably washed out of boot camp and was too ashamed to tell Mommy. That's why he never visits, right? That's why you're sitting here all alone. Because he's off somewhere. Let her go. The words cut through the diner like a blade through silk. Every head turned. James Williams stood 15 feet away. Newspaper discarded on his table. He'd removed his baseball cap. His stance was neutral, hands at his sides, weight balanced, but something fundamental had changed. The sleepy civilian was gone. In his place stood something else entirely. His eyes had gone flat and cold. Not angry. Anger was hot, chaotic, emotional. This was the opposite. This was absolute zero. The killing calm of a man who'd made peace with what came next. "What did you say?" Colt turned, still holding the photograph. "I said," James's voice remained quiet, but it carried command that made Colonel's stand straighter. "Let go of my mother." The words detonated like a flashbang. Rex's grip on Martha's arm loosened reflexively. Colt's smirk faltered. Bones took an involuntary step backward. Martha's eyes widened. "James." "It's okay, Mama." James hadn't moved, but his presence expanded, filling the space with coiled violence. "These gentlemen were just leaving." Colt recovered first, his bravado reasserting itself. "Your mother? This is your mother?" He laughed, but it sounded forced now. "Well, isn't that—" "You have 3 seconds to take your hand off her arm." James's tone hadn't changed, still quiet, still controlled. But something in those words made Rex's hand spring open as if Martha's arm had turned to hot iron. She stumbled back into the booth, rubbing her arm where his fingers had left red marks. "Or what?" Colt stepped forward, the photograph still in his hand. "What are you going to do about it, sailor boy?" James's eyes flicked to the photograph. His father's face, his own younger self, the sacred memory being profaned by cruel hands. He saw his mother's tears, saw the bruises forming on her arm, saw every humiliation she'd endured with dignity, finally collapsing under the weight of violation. Something clicked in his mind. Not a loss of control, but a conscious choice. The safety coming off, the mission parameters changing from observe to engage. His body language shifted, shoulders squared, weight dropped to his center, hands came up slightly. Not threatening, but ready. His breathing changed, slow, controlled, the combat rhythm of a man about to end a threat. The diner disappeared, the mission clarified. 3 hostiles, 1 protected civilian. Rules of engagement, minimum necessary force. Objective, neutralize threats, secure the package, complete the mission. "Last chance," James said softly. "Put down the photograph, apologize to my mother, walk away." Rex cracked his knuckles. Bones reached for something on his belt, a chain, maybe, or a knife. Colt smiled, raised the photograph, and let it drop. The frame hit the floor. Glass shattered. The image of Thomas Williams stared up from amid the shards. "Oops," Colt said. James moved. James closed the distance in 4 strides. Not running, not charging, just walking with purpose. Economy of movement, no telegraphing. His hands remained relaxed at his sides until the last possible moment. Rex saw him coming and instinctively tightened his grip on Martha's arm, pulling her partially out of the booth as a human shield. "Back off, hero, or Grandma gets—" James's right hand snapped out like a striking snake, 2 fingers extended, driving into the pressure point on the back of Rex's hand where the radial nerve crossed the metacarpal bones. The strike was surgical, approximately 12 pounds of pressure applied to a target the size of a dime. Rex's hand sprang open involuntarily, the neurological override shutting down his grip strength before his brain could even process pain. His fingers splayed wide, releasing Martha. "What?" Rex started. Before Rex could recover, James captured the now open hand, his left hand gripping Rex's wrist while his right hand controlled the back of Rex's hand. He stepped offline, rotating Rex's wrist 180 degrees against its natural range of motion. Not fast enough to break anything, but fast enough that Rex's body had no choice but to follow the joint lock or suffer a spiral fracture. Rex's superior size and strength became irrelevant. Physics trumped muscle mass. His entire body torqued to protect the compromised joint, spinning him around, his back now to James. "Ah! My wrist!" Rex bellowed. James maintained control of the wrist lock with his left hand while his right arm wrapped around Rex's throat. Not a choke, a control hold, applying pressure to the side of the neck away from the carotid. Simultaneously, he stepped behind Rex's leg and drove forward with his hips. Leverage, gravity, balance disruption. Rex went down like a falling tree, James controlling the descent, rotating him face first into the floor. The big man's cheek pressed against linoleum, James's knee between his shoulder blades, the wrist lock still active. Rex's arm bent at an angle that promised instant pain if he moved. Total time from initial contact to takedown: 13 seconds. Rex lay gasping, immobilized, utterly confused about how he'd ended up there. Colt had been frozen for the first 12 seconds, his brain trying to process how his enforcer, 30 pounds heavier and 6 inches taller than James, was now eating floor, but shock converted to rage. "You fucking—" Colt charged, throwing a wild haymaker aimed at James's head. Amateur, telegraphed, weight on the front foot. James released Rex, who stayed down, gasping, clutching his wrist, and pivoted 45 degrees, his front hand rising in a simple deflection block that redirected Colt's punch past his head. The momentum of Colt's own swing pulled him off balance. James didn't punch back, didn't need to. Instead, he stepped into Colt's center line, his hip checking Colt's hips, his hand guiding Colt's shoulder. Simple physics again, redirecting existing momentum rather than creating new force. Colt stumbled sideways, his trajectory altered, crashing into his original booth seat. The vinyl cushion broke his fall, but the wind exploded from his lungs as his ribs hit the table edge. He collapsed into the booth, gasping, his vision sparking with stars. "Stay down," James said quietly. Not a threat, a command. Colt stayed down. Bones had been circling, hand fumbling at his belt where a length of chain hung, a weapon. Crude, but effective. He got it free, 3 feet of steel links that could crush a skull or break ribs. He swung. James's left arm swept up in a circular block, catching Bones's wrist mid-swing, halting the chain's momentum before it could build killing force. His right hand shot forward simultaneously, fingers diving into the hollow above Bones's collarbone, where the brachial plexus nerve bundle sat vulnerable beneath skin. Pressure point techniques were controversial. Sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't, depending on pain tolerance and physiology. James applied approximately 20 pounds of focused pressure to nerves that controlled Bones's entire right arm. Bones' pain tolerance turned out to be average. His face went white. The chain clattered to the floor. His right arm went numb and useless, hanging limp at his side. His knees buckled. James maintained the pressure point control with one hand, while his other hand caught Bones's collar, lowering him to a sitting position against the wall rather than letting him collapse. No head trauma, no unnecessary injury. Bones sat there, whimpering, cradling his numb arm. James stepped back, creating distance, his eyes sweeping the 3 downed bikers in a final threat assessment. Rex, still prone, clutching his wrist, no fight left. Colt, slumped in the booth, gasping for air, eyes showing shock and confusion. Bones, sitting against the wall, tears streaming down his face, his right arm slowly regaining feeling with pins and needles agony. All three neutralized, none seriously injured. Controlled application of force, textbook execution. James's breathing hadn't changed. Still slow, still controlled, still combat-ready if the situation reignited. The diner existed in crystalline silence. Sally stood frozen behind the counter, coffee pot still in her hand, her mouth open in an expression somewhere between shock and awe. She'd known Jimmy Williams as a quiet boy who said please and thank you. She was looking at someone else entirely now. Earl Tucker had risen halfway from his seat during the confrontation, but now he slowly sat back down, his weathered face showing the kind of respect reserved for men who'd proven themselves in ways that transcended explanation. Big Mike had come out of the kitchen, spatula still in hand, and stood watching with the quiet nod of recognition. One veteran identifying another, understanding that what he'd just witnessed was the product of thousands of hours of training, discipline, and controlled violence. Martha remained in her booth, one hand over her mouth, her eyes wide and glistening. She looked at her son, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time seeing the warrior he'd become. Pride warred with fear, warred with relief on her face, her baby boy, the teenager in the photograph. Now this. James turned to her, and instantly the operator vanished. His face softened, his shoulders dropped. He was just a son again, concerned for his mother. "Mama, are you hurt?" He knelt beside the booth, his hands gentle as he examined her arm where Rex had grabbed her. The marks were already darkening to bruises. His jaw tightened. "Did he hurt you anywhere else?" Martha touched his face with trembling fingers, as if confirming he was real. "James, how did you... I'm sorry I didn't tell you I was in town," he said softly. "Wanted to surprise you." His eyes flicked to the broken photograph on the floor, to the scattered contents of her purse. His expression hardened again, just for a moment. Some surprise. Behind him, Rex groaned, trying to push himself up. "Don't!" James didn't turn around, didn't even raise his voice, but Rex froze. "You move before I tell you to, and we'll have a different conversation." "Understood?" Yes. Colt had recovered enough breath to speak, though he remained slumped in the booth. What the fuck are you?" James stood slowly, positioning himself between the bikers and his mother. When he answered, his voice carried 15 years of service, of impossible missions and impossible odds, of being the person others called when violence was the only answer. "I'm someone who knows the difference between strength and bullying." He looked at each of them in turn. "You three are the second kind. And today, you learned what happens when you run into the first." Bones whimpered. Rex looked away. Colt's bravado had evaporated like morning mist. Outside, a siren wailed, growing closer. Sally had called the sheriff. James didn't move from his protective stance, standing between his mother and the men who'd terrorized her, a wall of controlled violence that promised swift consequences if anyone moved wrong. The storm had passed, but its echoes would linger long after the rain stopped falling. The siren cut off abruptly outside. Car doors slammed, but James didn't move yet, didn't turn toward the sound of approaching law enforcement. He kept his eyes on the three men, still assessing, still calculating. Then slowly, deliberately, He extended his hand toward Rex. Rex stared at the offered hand like it might be a trap, his eyes flicking between James's face and the hand, confusion written across his features. "Come on," James said quietly. "Let me help you up." Rex hesitated, then took the hand. James pulled him upright with controlled strength, then immediately began examining Rex's wrist with clinical precision, rotating it gently, checking range of motion, palpating for swelling. "Nothing broken," James said. "You'll have some inflammation for a day or two. Ice it 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off. Keep it elevated tonight." He released Rex's hand. "You'll be fine." Rex nodded mutely, cradling his wrist against his chest. James moved to Bones next, crouching beside him. "How's the arm?" I can't feel it," Bones whimpered. "That's temporary. The nerve compression interrupts the signal pathways. Feeling will return fully in about 10 to 15 minutes. James's fingers probed the pressure point area carefully, checking for any damage beyond the intended effect. "You might have some tenderness, but no permanent injury. I made sure of that." Bones looked up at him, tears still wet on his face, utterly bewildered by this gentleness from the man who'd just dismantled him. Finally, James approached Colt, who was still slumped in the booth, hand pressed against his ribs. "Let me see." "Don't touch me," Colt muttered, but there was no heat in it, just exhaustion and humiliation. "I need to make sure you don't have a cracked rib." James's tone left no room for argument. Colt reluctantly lowered his hand. James pressed carefully along his rib cage, watching Colt's face for signs of sharp pain. "You're going to have a bruise, but nothing's broken. You got lucky. You hit the table at an angle that dispersed the impact." James stepped back, surveying all three men. Then he turned and walked to where the photograph lay amid shattered glass. He knelt, carefully picking up the frame, brushing away the glass shards with his thumb. The image was intact. His father's proud face, his own younger self, both preserved behind cracked glass. He carried it to Martha with both hands, the gesture almost ceremonial. "Here, Mama." He placed it gently in her hands. "I'll get you a new frame. Something stronger." Martha clutched the photograph to her chest, and the tears finally came. Not from pain or fear, but from relief and love and the overwhelming gratitude of a mother who'd raised a good man. James kissed her forehead, then turned back to face the bikers. The diner bell chimed as Sheriff Tom Brennan entered, a lean man in his 50s with gray at his temples and the patient eyes of someone who'd seen humanity at its worst and best. His hand rested casually on his service weapon, not threatening, but ready. "Sally called," he said simply, taking in the scene. 3 shaken bikers, scattered purse contents, James Williams standing in the center like the calm at the eye of a storm. "Somebody want to tell me what happened here?" "In a moment, Sheriff," James said respectfully. "I need to say something first." Brennan nodded slowly, recognizing something in James's bearing. "Go ahead." James turned to face Colt, Rex, and Bones. When he spoke, his voice carried across the diner with quiet authority, not loud but impossible to ignore. "I want you to understand something. What just happened here? That wasn't a fight. That wasn't me beating you up. That was me stopping you with the absolute minimum force necessary." He paused, letting that sink in. "I'm trained in 43 different ways to kill or permanently disable an opponent using only my hands. I could have shattered Rex's wrist, could have crushed Colt's trachea, could have driven my thumb into Bones's carotid and put him down for 5 minutes. The three men went pale. "But I didn't," James continued, "because my training isn't about domination. It's about protection. It's about using violence only when necessary, and only to the degree necessary. That's the difference between a warrior and a bully." He gestured to his mother. "That woman raised me alone after my father died in service to this country. She taught school for 35 years, shaped hundreds of lives, gave everything she had to her community. She's earned respect, not because she can force you to give it, but because she's worthy of it." Colt's eyes drifted to the photograph in Martha's hands, and something shifted in his expression. "Strength," James said, his voice softening slightly, "isn't about how much fear you can create. It's about how much restraint you can show when you have power. Real strength is choosing not to hurt someone when you easily could. That's what separates civilized people from predators." The silence that followed was absolute. Sheriff Brennan cleared his throat. "Lieutenant Commander Williams, you want to press charges? From what Sally told me on the phone, we've got assault on an elderly person, destruction of property, public disturbance—" "Wait," Colt said suddenly. He'd been staring at the photograph this entire time, and now he stood on shaky legs. "Lieutenant Commander, you're really Navy?" 15 years, James confirmed. "SEAL Team 3, 4 deployments to Afghanistan, 3 to Iraq, 1 to Syria, and 6 other places I can't talk about." Colt walked slowly toward Martha, his steps uncertain. "Ma'am, can I see that photo?" Martha hesitated, but something in Colt's face, a brokenness that hadn't been there before, made her hold it out. Colt took it with trembling hands, studying Thomas Williams's face. "Army service uniform. Looks like late 60s. Early 70s insignia?" His voice cracked. "Vietnam?" "2 tours," Martha said quietly. "My grandfather served in Vietnam." Colt's thumb traced the edge of the frame, careful of the broken glass. "He came home broken. Died when I was 12. He swallowed hard. "I never knew how to honor what he did. I've been angry for so long." He looked up at James, and tears streaked through the road dust on his face. "I was Army, too. Got dishonorably discharged for assault. Lost everything. And instead of fixing myself, He gestured helplessly at Rex and Bones. "I surrounded myself with people who made me feel powerful. But your son just showed me what actual power looks like. And I'm ashamed." He turned to Martha, and when he spoke, his voice shook with genuine remorse. "Ma'am, I am so sorry. There's no excuse for what we did. None. You deserved respect, and we gave you cruelty. I'm sorry." Rex and Bones exchanged glances, then stepped forward. "I'm sorry, too," Rex mumbled, not meeting Martha's eyes. "That was wrong." "Sorry," Bones whispered. Martha looked at James. He gave her the slightest nod. "Your call, Mama." "I accept your apology," Martha said with quiet dignity. "And I hope you'll choose better from here forward." Sheriff Brennan stepped forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You 3 are going to leave Meadowbrook right now. You're going to ride straight out of town, and you're not coming back. If I see you here again, I'll arrest you for trespassing. And if Miss Martha or Lieutenant Commander Williams decide they want to press charges later, I've got 6 witnesses who will testify about what happened here. We clear?" "Clear," Colt said. He carefully handed the photograph back to Martha. "Thank you for your grace, ma'am. You're a better person than I deserve to meet." He turned to James. "And thank you for not breaking me. I needed this. Needed someone to show me I'm not as strong as I thought I was. Maybe now I can start building actual strength. James nodded once, respect flowing between two veterans, one who'd honored his service, one who'd lost his way. The three bikers walked toward the door. At the threshold, Colt paused and looked back. "Semper Fi," he said quietly. "Wrong branch," James replied with the ghost of a smile. "But I appreciate the sentiment. Get help, soldier, it's not too late." The door closed behind them. Engines roared to life. 3 motorcycles pulled out of the parking lot and disappeared down the highway. Sheriff Brennan turned to James, extending his hand. "Heard you were back in town. Your mama's been bragging about you for years." James shook his hand. "Just wanted a quiet breakfast, Sheriff." "Well, you certainly livened up the morning." Brennan looked at Martha. "You all right, Miss Martha?" "I am now," she said, looking at her son with fierce pride. As the sheriff took statements, as life slowly returned to normal in Rosie's diner, James sat beside his mother, her hand in his, the broken photograph between them. Sometimes mercy was stronger than vengeance. Sometimes the hardest fight was choosing not to fight at all. 2 weeks later, the envelope arrived on a Thursday morning, addressed in careful block letters to Mrs. Martha Williams, C.O. Rosie's Diner, Meadowbrook, GA. Sally brought it to Martha's usual booth with her coffee, eyebrows raised in curiosity. "This came for you," Sally said. "Return address is somewhere in Alabama." Martha set down her fork, pecan pie again, always pecan pie, and opened the envelope with careful fingers. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, the handwriting cramped but deliberate, like someone unused to writing had taken great care with every word. "Dear Mrs. Williams, you don't know me, but 2 weeks ago I was one of the men who disrespected you at Rosie's Diner. I was the one who dropped your photograph. I'm the reason your son had to step in. I've been trying to write this letter every day since then, and I keep throwing away the drafts because nothing I say can make up for what we did. But I need you to know something. I'm a veteran, Army, deployed twice to Iraq. Got discharged dishonorably after I put another soldier in the hospital during a fight. I told myself it wasn't my fault, that the anger was justified, that the world had broken me, and I had a right to break back. For 3 years, I've been riding around with wrecks and bones, starting fights, hurting people, convincing myself that power and fear were the same as strength. I thought being dangerous made me strong. Then your son showed me what actual strength looks like. He could have destroyed us. I've done enough hand-to-hand combat training to recognize a professional when I see one. He could have put all 3 of us in the hospital without breaking a sweat. But he didn't. He used exactly enough force to stop us, and not one bit more. That restraint, that choice not to hurt us when he easily could, that's what broke through to me. Not the takedown, not the pain, the mercy. I'm writing this from a VA outpatient facility in Birmingham. I checked myself in the day after we left Meadowbrook. I'm getting help for the anger, for the PTSD I've been ignoring for years, for all the ways I've been destroying myself and everyone around me. Your son gave me something I didn't deserve, a second chance. I don't know if I'll ever be worthy of it, but I'm going to try. Please tell him thank you. And please accept my deepest apology for the pain we caused you. You showed me grace when I deserved judgment. That's a gift I'll carry for the rest of my life. Respectfully, former Specialist Marcus Colt, Jennings, U.S. Army, 2009-2016. Martha read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face, but this time they were tears of hope. She folded it carefully and placed it in her purse, right next to the photograph, now in its new, stronger frame. "Good news?" Sally asked, refilling her coffee. "The best kind," Martha said softly. "The kind that reminds you people can change." 3 months later, James stood in the community center basement, facing 12 veterans ranging from 23 to 67 years old. Some were combat vets like him. Others had never seen action but carried different wounds: military sexual trauma, toxic leadership, the invisible injuries that didn't show on medical records. "This program isn't about learning how to fight," James said, his voice carrying to the back of the room. "It's about learning when not to fight. It's about recognizing that true strength isn't about domination. It's about control. Control of yourself first. The situation second." He'd started the program through a grant from a veterans nonprofit, teaching de-escalation techniques to at-risk veterans struggling with anger, PTSD, and reintegration challenges. 2 nights a week, he led them through scenarios, breathing exercises, and tactical empathy training. "Anybody can throw a punch," James continued. "That's easy. The hard part is standing down when every instinct screams at you to engage. The hard part is choosing mercy when you have the power to choose violence." A young Marine in the front row raised his hand. "But, Lieutenant Commander, what if mercy makes you look weak?" James smiled. "Let me tell you about the strongest thing I ever did. I was on leave having breakfast when 3 bikers terrorized my mother, and I consciously chose, to stop them without seriously hurting them. That choice? That was harder than any combat mission I've ever run. Because violence is easy. Restraint takes real strength." He saw understanding dawn on several faces. "That's what we're here to learn," James said. "How to be strong enough to choose peace." 6 months later, Martha stood before the youth group at First Baptist Church, 20 teenagers watching her with the particular skepticism reserved for adults, telling them how to live. "Dignity," Martha said, her voice gentle but firm, "is not something that can be taken from you. It can only be given away, and even then, only if you choose to surrender it." She told them about the morning at Rosie's diner, leaving out the violence, but emphasizing the choice, her choice to maintain Grace under assault, her son's choice to use minimal force, even Colt's choice to seek redemption. "I could have screamed at those men," Martha said. "Could have cursed them. Could have given them the anger and hatred they were trying to provoke. But then I would have become what they were, someone who inflicts pain because they're in pain." A girl in the back row raised her hand. "But Miss Martha, doesn't that mean letting people walk all over you?" "No, baby." Martha's smile was warm. "It means refusing to let someone else's cruelty define who you are. It means maintaining your character even when others have lost theirs. That's not weakness. That's the hardest kind of strength there is." Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds of Rosie's diner, casting the same amber stripes across the same worn linoleum. Martha sat in her usual booth, third from the entrance window seat, and James sat across from her, home on leave again. Sally brought them coffee without asking, her smile genuine and warm. "The usual, Miss Martha? And Jimmy, you want the number 3? "Please," they said in unison, and Sally laughed as she walked away. Martha reached across the table and took her son's hand. His fingers, capable of such precision violence, closed gently around hers. I got a letter yesterday, James said, from the VA facility in Birmingham. Colt Marcus completed the program. He's volunteering now, helping other veterans. Martha squeezed his hand. Because you showed him mercy. Because you taught me that mercy was possible, James corrected. Everything I am, Mama, comes from you. Dad showed me how to serve, but you showed me why to serve. You taught me that true strength isn't about who you can hurt. It's about who you choose not to hurt. Martha's eyes glistened. Your father would be so proud of you. I hope so. James looked out the window at the town square, at the memorial with his father's name etched in granite. I think he'd understand that the hardest battles aren't the ones we fight with weapons. They're the ones we fight with ourselves. Choosing discipline over anger, mercy over vengeance, protection over domination. That's what makes you strong, Martha said softly. Not your training, not your skills, your heart. Your choice to use power only in service of something greater than yourself. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking coffee, watching the morning unfold in their small Georgia town. Around them, life continued. Earl Tucker reading his paper, young couples making plans, Big Mike singing along to the radio. This was what they'd fought for, both of them in different ways. The quiet dignity of ordinary moments, the safety of community, the possibility that broken people could be made whole. I'm glad you were here that day, Martha said finally. But I also know you can't always be here to protect me. I know. James's grip tightened slightly on her hand. But I also know you don't need me to. You've been strong your whole life, Mama. I just made sure people recognized it. Martha smiled, her eyes crinkling with warmth and pride. We did good, didn't we? You and me. We did, James agreed. We chose grace over anger, and that changed lives, not just Colt's, but ours too. Because every time we choose mercy, we become a little more fully human. Outside, the Georgia sun climbed higher. Inside Rosie's diner, a mother and son shared coffee and pie, and the quiet understanding that true strength was measured not in dominance, but in dignity. Not in who you could destroy, but in who you chose to save, including yourself. Thanks for staying till the end. Have you ever had to show restraint when anger would have been easier, or defended someone who needed it? Share your story in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this.